Good morning. My name is Glen Coleman, and it's my privilege to be here giving this presentation regarding this beautiful old post office building and a lot of things that went on around that still hang in my memory today. I was actually born here in McKinney in 1942, so I've had a lot of experience here because my dad was a postman. He went off to after graduating from A&M. He went to work for Borden's, and then World War II came along, and he joined up and became a sailor. And Dad was in the Navy, and one of the things about being in the Navy is that you gather civil service points. And as you gather more civil service points, either through your service or through testing or however you gather them, it gives you a better opportunity in the competition for government jobs. So even though he worked for Borden's Dairy after graduating from A&M, after the war, when he came back, one of his friends suggested, you ought to go down and try for a job at the post office because you have all these civil service points and it wouldn't make you competitive, and that's what he did. So he got a job down here, and he worked here at the old post office, what I call the old post office, here on the corner of Virginia and Chestnut. Spent his time here until he moved it to the new post office, which is over on Lamar and Church Street, or just east of there. So I want to share you some of the stories of my memories from way back around 1950 or so. I was 10 years old, and spent some time back behind these walls. The first thing that I remember coming back into this building after all these years, coming over to the museum, was the smell of all things. Post office buildings always seem to smell the same. They smell of wet paper or whatever it happens to be, but it has a definite smell. But you would come down and you would see this beautiful building out here, and with the massive steps. And for a little kid like I was in those days, that was pretty impressive. And you come up those steps and you go through revolving doors. Now, having been raised in McKinney, Texas, with a population of about 5,000, you didn't see many revolving doors in your young life, and I didn't either. So I always would get in those things, go round and round and round and round until my dad said, get in here, and which I did. Now, you walk through that front door, right in front of you is one window. And in that window, which is now a door, that's where you would go and you would mail a package, or you would pick up a package, or that there was a special delivery, you would go to that particular window. And there was always some shining face, one of Dad's friends behind that window, and he would sell you stamps or whatever it was, whatever service you needed. But the great American public, the general public, never got past that lobby. You could turn left as you came in the front door, and over there was another window, and that's where you would do special things like buying postal savings bonds. So postal savings bonds were like a U.S. savings bond, except they were just issued by the post office. They're very similar. You'd buy them, wait till they grow to maturity, you cash them in whenever you wanted to. That was over to the left, so there's some kind of a business office. And I remember there was a beautiful safe back there. And I was always impressed by all the gold leaf printing and design that was on that particular safe. Now, the interesting part, though, is when you come through those revolving doors is if you turn right, because that's where all the mailboxes were. But the special thing that I ran into, and my dad insisted that I sit there and look at them, were all the wanted posters. There were some stands there with some of the meanest looking people that you've ever seen. They were wanted for burglary or robbery or whatever it happened to be. But there were some bad dudes on that wall, and my dad always insisted I ever go over there and look at them, because he said, you don't want to be one of these guys. And if you walk past those, you come to some stairs, and it would take you upstairs to a couple of small rooms, and that's where the recruiting office was. And the reason I always liked to do that, remember, the war was just over. And so it was right in our minds about you were so much into the war and people coming back from the war and their experiences. But they had these recruiting posters, and every time they would change them, they would always save them for me. So I had this great collection, which I still had them, but great collection of old 1950s recruiting posters. And they were kind of fun to have in my room. Right there where the stairs were and over by the west door was the only door that you could really go through and get into the bowels of the post office, back there where we're sitting right now, because it was back here where all the action was. It was back here where all the guys would be back here working, sorting mail. And they would, each one of the postmen would have, Dad always called them pigeonholes. What they were was a rack of small shoebox-sized openings. So whenever they would get a basket full of mail, they would go through and they would separate out the mail, put them in different packages, and they'd wrap them with a leather strap, throw them in their bag, and then head out for the delivery. And so the postman would always spend a lot of time back there separating out their mail every day before they made the delivery. A couple of little interesting side notes. One is that as they handled the mail, now remember stamps in those days, they were all lick them and stick them. They were all lick them, put them on the envelope. Sometimes they would stay on the envelope, sometimes they didn't. And whenever they ended up on the floor, they would usually go home with the postman that day. The other thing that I remember is that there was a basket about the size of a bathtub. And for all the magazines that couldn't be delivered or didn't have an address label on them or whatever the reason, they would get tossed in that, and the postmen were allowed to go and take one or two and take them home with them. So I hate to admit it, but I was in college before I ever realized that you had to buy magazines and stamps. But there were always a lot of stamps and magazines around the house as we went through. The most interesting part of this building, I remember as a young kid, was the basement. And I never had seen a toilet with the tank up high on the wall. It had a chain with a big handle on it, and after you did your business there, you would pull on that chain and it would flush like crazy. And of course, being an inquisitive little kid, I would flush it, and then I would flush it, and I'd keep on flushing it until one of the postmen said, "Stop." The other part of this that I really liked, and I just love this part of the story, was up on the roof. Now, again, a 10-year-old kid in McKinney, Texas, you don't get off the ground much, and to go up there, which is 3 stories up there, was like Mary Poppins' world. It was a magical world that you could see forever, I thought, as a small kid. And and the reason that we would go up there was one of the postmen each day would go up. It seems like there was a catwalk up there of some sort. I seem to remember this catwalk that would take you across the attic, through a hole, and up on the roof, and that's where the flagpole was. So the postman would climb up there. My dad would take me up there, and we'd run the flag up the flagpole to fly for the rest of the day. But from that viewpoint, again, that's 3 stories up. And you just didn't get more than 3 stories up in those days. The view from up there was so magical because you would see the tops of other buildings. That doesn't seem like much today, but to me as a young kid, it meant a lot. Due north across the street was an old dark machine shop, and everything in there was covered in grime. And the whole building was just kind of a dark, musty place that smelled of arc welding and sparks and that sort of thing. Just across the street, catty corner across Virginia and Chestnut, was the Ford sales building. I can't remember the name of the dealership in those days, but they sold Fords right there. And immediately across the street to the west was a gas station right there on the corner. My memory of that thing was that, remember everybody leaving the post office and going out there to see them wash an elephant. That's right, circus was in town, and there was an elephant laying on the pad right outside the gas station. And my sister and I were able to get a broom and scrub this elephant as it lay there on the sidewalk. Directly behind me to the north was to the south was a furniture company, and right next to it was Duval's hamburger joint. So even from up on top of the roof, you could always smell the hamburgers cooking. The Chevrolet house, the Chevrolet dealership was right next to or was immediately to the east of the post office. So down here on the square were all the grocery stores. There was A&P and Safeway. All the car dealerships were here, and really there was nothing in McKinney other than a few motels out on Tennessee Street, which was the highway through town, maybe a few restaurants and a few motels out on the edge of town, but everything else was within a block of the square. So you can imagine the activity that went on down here. All the shopping took place down here, the grocery shopping, the car shopping, all the insurance agencies. They had 5 and dime stores, which as a kid we just loved, because that's where you'd get all these cheap little toys made in Japan out of old beer cans. But I have some great memories, not only of the square, but especially of this building, of all the things that went on down here, of all the relationships and all the friendships that went on right here within this room. There was a lot of laughter. Dad seemed to always love his job working here and all the other gentlemen did too. I don't remember any ladies working in this building at all. I think it was kind of a man's job. Now, Dad's route initially was the downtown area. This picture, I think, was taken somewhere over by the First Methodist Church. But he shows Dad in his working attire. Always wore a tie, always wore a uniform, carried this leather pouch over here. And I couldn't find this hat that he has on, but I do remember this old pith helmet that he would wear, and it's really taken a beating over the years, but it would still keep him cool in the hot summer. And he would dress like this regardless of the weather. I mean, in the middle of the summer, he'd still be wearing these long sleeves and carrying that backpack or that mail pouch, and it was always soaked through with his sweat, because twice a day he would climb every stair in downtown McKinney delivering that mail. And his legs were in great shape, and he was in great shape, and he lived a long, long time, I think, because of the nature of his job and the conditioning that he had to be in for that. But Dad was known for, he was called a whistling postman because he just loved to whistle, and he had this dog that followed him everywhere. Dad never knew where that dog came from, never knew where it went, but one day he showed up, followed him everywhere, and as he would stop and go up the stairs at these offices, the dog would just sit downstairs and wait for him, and then they'd move on down the street. One day the dog didn't appear, and Dad never saw the dog again, but for years this old black dog followed him around everywhere he went as he made his route around the town. The postman in that day, Dad always told me that there were three people who knew everything that was going on in McKinney, Texas. One was the phone operator, because she listened in on every telephone call that was ever been made, and so she would always know everything that was going on. The next one is the postman, and those days they had penny postcards. Later on it was a 2-cent postcard. But as the postman would walk from house to house, guess what? He'd read your mail because it was written on the back of a postcard. So the postman knew pretty much everything that was going on. But the third one really surprised me. My dad said that the third person who knew everything that was going on in McKinney was the trash man, because he knows what you throw out, and sometimes we're not too careful disguising the things that we throw out. So being the son of a postman put me in with a great group of men, a lot of role models to support me, and they were all friendly toward me, and it was just always fun to come down to this old building. So it's a pleasure to come into this building again. Every time I come in, it just bursts with memories. I hope you'll come down and enjoy it also, because it's a wonderful place, lots of good memories, lots of good displays, lots of good opportunities to learn about McKinney and to learn about the past. Thanks.